And so we come to what I believe is the primary piece of this exhibit, the star attraction, if you will. So I tried.
Back there.
Well, you can probably look at older stuff too.
So here's me as a baby. I just had to bring up that picture. Yeah. I just saw it and I was like, wait, was that it?
Yeah, so he found an abandoned storage locker and he looked like this when we found it.
Oh, okay.
So this is him in 1990.
Okay, this was 1989.
Yeah, so that was right after he was built. And
That's my
then,
mom, yeah.
and then like all the thermoplastic in his head and just disintegrated. So we had to build him. We had to build him a little bit differently. So we couldn't replace the thermoplastic. So like he's all foam now. He's basically stuffed with like a little bit something.
Okay. Because I saw that, I just had to bring up that picture. Like, wait a minute. My dad was in my RV business, so he was like gaming conventions in like Ohio.
Could have been like this was the Nintendo World Championship.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll buy the
Okay, if I take a picture.
I've run into stuff like that.
Well, now you can get it.
Should be one.
Where's Flying Mario?
Oh, are we? Maybe we are missing one.
I was just looking at it. I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, you're right. It's not bad. So this was a Game Boy that was a prize-winning Game Boy. Over here to your left, there's the ultimate Game Boy Design Contest where people sent drew their fantasy Game Boys, and then the top three there on the left, Nintendo made into actual Game Boys. Made one of each of them and sent them to the winners. And then this is that blue Game Boy there.
thank you.
So the artist here is named Hiro Nagame. She actually ran the company called Workhouse, which was they weren't a Nintendo company, but they were exclusively contracted with Nintendo. So they basically got all of the Nintendo Power work. So this is her work. Her and her husband Yoshi put this together. They estimate it took them about 200 hours because back in the day, they were you couldn't export a file or anything like that. It was literally her walking through the world and stopping every couple inches and taking a photograph. So basically, there was they called it the device, which was just some piece of gear that would allow them to send the image of the screen to a printer. It was basically the same kind of printer as a Game Boy printer. It's just in color.
The thermal paper.
Yeah, thermal paper.
The sticky
and
back.
so basically these 2 or 3 inch sticky paper. And so she just took about 500 photographs and then hand cut them together and pasted them. And what I think is charming is that you can see, because this is obviously the final poster, you can see the color variant like here. You can see it in the final and where it is here because of the refresh rate. There was slight color variations. And you can actually see that in the final. Or like down here, she tried to match the wave pattern, right? So she agonized over these little pieces trying to get the wave pattern right.
And then here it's it almost blends in.
Yeah.
You can kind of see it.
Yeah, so these are actual envelopes sent in by readers to the Player's Pulse section of Nintendo Power. These are incredibly difficult to find because Nintendo never returned these envelopes to children. So the only way that we were able to get these is in 2010, I believe, or early 2010s. They bulldozed the original Nintendo America headquarters and made built a new building. So as the employee that ended up taking these tells it very heroically, where he says as the wrecking balls were coming in, I ran into the building and into the call center and took a bunch of stuff off the wall. So he was able to save a handful of these envelopes. We have about 100 of them in our archive total, which is we love that we've saved that many, but at the same time it's a little heartbreaking because again they were getting thousands of submissions a day. So just thinking about how many envelopes were lost is a little sad. I actually have had a couple people reach out now, 35 years later, telling me that they're the artist for these, because I post stuff on Twitter and stuff like that, and so they actually I've found a couple of the artists now, and most of them, it's funny, most of the time when I reach out to people who drew art for the magazine as children, they are now professional artists, which is awesome. It's really cool to see that Nintendo Power was the genesis of their career. This is the oil painting that was used for the cover of Super Castlevania 4. It was volume 32 of Nintendo Power. So you can hear it. You can hear here you can see the final, and then these are the 2 preliminary sketches. What's kind of interesting about this first preliminary one is that he's wearing the costume that Simon Belmont was wearing on the cover of issue 2, which was just like a guy in a Halloween costume holding a head. So the artist used the wrong Simon Belmont as reference, and then he had to revise him this is the costume that he actually wears in Super Castlevania 4. So that was a huge revision. One of the things that I think is funny about this piece is that the artist doesn't particularly like it. It's one of my favorite things that's ever been painted at all in any art form, and yet the artist really wanted me to get it out of his sight.
And then who was the artist again?
His name's Phillip Howe.
Phillip Howe. Did he do any other paintings here, or was it?
Yeah, Phil also did this Cyrax that didn't get used. As you can see, sometimes this is a good example of sometimes the artist wouldn't get enough information. So this was supposed to be Cyrax. It looks nothing like Cyrax, and so they weren't able to use it. And so we did get a Cyrax cover, but it's just his versus screen screenshot,
not like a drawn one.
Yeah, and so because after this one didn't pan out, they didn't have time for him to paint a new one. The thing about Nintendo Power work is it had to happen really, really fast, and so it was almost always easier and faster to have when they needed art from a third-party company to have a local Nintendo Power artist repaint the art rather than have to wait to, in this case, contact Capcom and say, hey, can you send us high-res art, because there wasn't digital file transfer then, so they would have had to physically mail them art. And so also tracking things in the mail wasn't that great either, so they could request art from Japan and then have it never show up when they need it really, really soon. So yeah, that was a primary driver to have a lot of this art. Even though this looks like official Capcom art, it's a Nintendo Power artist redrawing the Japanese Capcom art.
Amazing. So yeah, so basically kind of counterfeit, not really, but
right. Yeah, it makes it so that it's fake and authentic at the same time, right? It's authentic in that it is the art that was made for the magazine. It is fake in that it is someone else redrawing the original art.
Yeah, I'll give you a call when I run into that floor. Taking pictures of anything I got. I run into the devs and have that stuff ready. The gargoyles guy is and he had an art for the gargoyles. That's what the guy. He had the prototype of this, and he had this house, so I got him dumped it. He said his Atari stuff, he had Atari needs to do, and I was like, they worked last time I had it. Real life
Experience, man. No, it's like, it's really cool to do it, man.
I have a tattoo project where I have all this. All the dot records.
Yeah. So you can actually see some of the physical models that we have inside the glass case or the acrylic case right over there.
Oh, were those? So we were wondering which came first, the model or the cover, but I guess those are the models.
Those are the models that they photographed for the
Oh
covers.
man, I'll look at those again. Okay, so because like the shoes, I thought somebody saw a picture of the shoes and then they made the shoes.
Oh no,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Give me the horn.
Most of the stuff is done for speed, right? Like a lot of the Mega Man work, for instance, that's an American Nintendo Power artist repainting Japanese art because they needed high-res art. And there was only a month lag, so they weren't always working on the next month. They had time to go take that company to mail us high-res art, so they just get most of the time. In fact, even the terminal, the two little Marios over there, that is a Nintendo Power artist repainting Japanese Nintendo art. So even just getting it from Nintendo in
I can't believe you find the Dr. Wiley guy. It's good to see that stuff. Like Mario's here, might be I would love. Eventually, I'll go in there and take a really good picture and then recreate it. And then get like 4K back with the power straight. Maybe a custom Nintendo Power.
just a single person walking around, took pictures. And the thing is, this is a near final build of the game that is part of the random encounters. So they would run into battles and they would have to run away from or fight other, which is why it took, I think they said it was like 200 hours. Somewhere around there. It was a long time.
Yeah, you can tell it's like it looks like
yeah, you can see the tiles, like, you know, they actually tried to get the wave out of
really. I thought the developer of the game would just like do this for free or whatever.
But see, the thing is, the developers didn't have a way of getting those maps out. This is all how all maps were made back in the 80s.
I remember like I pulled in the Zelda map, so someone did the exact same.
Yeah, as far as we know, this is like the only surviving example of a player map that exists. I mean, I'm sure there are something somewhere, but yeah, this is because it's a process. Very, very long.
That's right. Exactly.
I'm gonna try by a question type or something.
You know they have that like AI finish. I think that'd be cool to see what it comes around this.
Yeah, okay, ChatGPT get this Dragon Warrior thing open and for me.
Get a picture of me with this real quick.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, is there a line?
Was it thick?
Wait, do you want to wear something? Oh, look at you.
These are tremendous.
Well, I know there's 4 pieces in here that I've never shown to anyone. So there's 4 brand new pieces, and then oftentimes I try to get a switch thing out. We have enough content that I can do slightly different shows for ever, really.
Like chicken cheese.
Yeah, that's the 1989 official Nintendo mascot costume. Yeah, the Nintendo Comic System. Yeah. Yeah. Those Valiant artists did a piece of actually that the Expo piece of theirs was
Yes, it is.
and they did some work, like they did a Valkyries comic that was specifically dedicated to Power. That was done by a Valiant artist. I can't figure out who it is though, which is funny because it just says credits or something. But every Valiant artist I've asked, they're like, we don't know who it is. So, grades above 9 for Nintendo Power, but like I have a
Back up.
I have a bunch of so in the 50th issue they allowed you to buy as a set, right? There was like so I have a set that had never been opened. The only thing is like the vibrations of the earth was the only thing and just the cover up just from them sitting on each other. Not moving was enough to scream my one is ridiculous. Like I can't like you look at those magazines, you can rub the ink off with your thumb. Like you
Oh wow, it's layered on top.
definitely their style of coloring.
Yeah, it's layered on top. Wow.
So like that's why like this is like several different market artists. Yeah. But so it was like a marketing conflict. But I know that a Valiant artist did the coloring.
Yeah, it's Janet Jackson. No doubt. It's Janet Jackson. That's her style.
She laughed when I showed that.
Obviously.
But she laughed when I showed this. But they changed it from
Yeah, it did. Well, I didn't want to do pink for sure. But yeah, it's definitely Janet's style for sure. That's awesome. You bought a red fuzzy. That's sweet. She's so cool. She's great.
Excuse me.
Yes, take a picture of it.
I did not see anything.
Lost it. Thanks.
Marching, I know.
And he goes,
The V-Bucks
like
of
2005.
yesteryear.
Back then, and martial art was it was like you didn't think about it. They didn't think anything.
Like Ken Matroni is a good friend of mine. He did all the art short films, and for years, you know, I really like wrestling for years.
Yeah.
You have to get out there. You have to start doing it. He does like animation directing and he does storyboards and stuff. That's what he does these days. And he was like, gosh, that's so crazy. Yeah. I'm like, just trust people. Yeah.
And he is. Yeah, those are yours. Yeah, I did the Valiant fan panel at Comic-Con. I started in 2005, and I did it for 15 years. And it was just something for shits and giggles did it. We brought in old artists and stuff like that. And we did one year, it was concentration on the stuff. It was had Rodney Ramos, those guys worked on all that stuff. Laura Hitchcock, and just Jay Jackson. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work.
When I saw your sign, I was like, I'm just gonna go see if he's there. I'll just check it out.
Oh, I hate it. You can't send other people with the art.
That's kind of what I figured. It's not the kind of thing you want to let somebody else have.
Yeah, you know, it's one of those things. Like, if somebody has, it always has these controls.
Yeah.
Because I'm never gonna put anyone that I care about in a position where it's like, okay, so you've destroyed a piece of price. Sorry.
Yeah, they can't be replaced.
Where do we go from here?
Yeah. When something can't be replaced and it gets destroyed, there's really nothing else.
Yeah, I broke a frame. The Las Vegas frame, broke it. I broke that today.
Like when you load it into a car to a friend and it's I'm like, I need to come back with one piece, man. If not, it's okay if I break it.
I was mad because like I want to do more like East Coast shows or like Midwest shows. There's so much demand.
Yeah.
It's just like I can't do that much time. I have to drive it, and it has to be.
Yep.
So it's like I can't just take 12 days to do a show.
Especially while raising a daughter, you know. It's
She's
just,
not old enough to come with me.
Yeah.
So like I have to take the job there. All right. She's old enough to come with you.
then you have a built-in helper. So,
Chris and I are both getting old, so we need to do that. New strong back.
I used to always help my friends load their stuff and did this exact same video to sell stuff. Yeah. Oh, I believe that. I've had that happen. Like my eyes have just gotten worse. Yeah. Last year that happened to me, and I actually wear bifocals. I guess you can't see them in this one because they're blended. Like about a month before I didn't even use it. Now I can't see anything. So yeah, I totally would.
Yeah, this is because it's like a Street Fighter game.
Like we were saying, you're younger in your groups.
Oh, yeah, he trips fighters.
Bro, you're on watching that. Yeah. But it's a big Final Fantasy 6 fan.
Which is funny because if you open up that issue, we've got a cover and the interior is all Final Fantasy. Yeah.
Man, this is crazy to see this in person.
Oh. That doesn't sound familiar. Great. So it's like a side-scrolling game. So you see that side, you have like 100 of group, and like they're like all walking, and then there's like a cliff, they'll all fall off the cliff and die. So you have to like build a bridge real quick before they get there, and then there's like another obstacle, you have to build a thing over that. So you want to keep them all alive. You want to keep them alive like, before they beat the level. It's pretty fun. You have, like, you're basically just keeping them out of danger.
Those three got made in actual Game Boys.
Oh man, that is so cool. Dude, this is even cooler seeing it in person.
Thank you.
Like, this is just great.
And then who was the artist again?
His name's Phillip Howe.
Phillip Howe.
Phil also did this this Cyrex that didn't get used. As you can see, sometimes this is a good example of like sometimes the artist wouldn't get enough information. So this was supposed to be Cyrex. It looks nothing like Cyrex, and so they weren't able to use it. And so we did get a Cyrex cover, but it's just his like versus screen screenshot.
Not like a drawn one.
Yeah, and so because they after this one didn't pan out, they didn't have time for him to paint a new one.
Got it.
And speaking of slapping the thing right on top, this is one of the few examples where you can kind of see them like doing the pasting, all of that. They actually, the Nintendo Power stuff was actually a clear file that they would lay on top of their
Oh yeah, she was. You're right. And that's right. She did do one.
No, that's exactly what we're seeing right here. The depth of the one.
Oh yeah.
This is it. This is NES. These are This is Game Boy.
Because this is 6 right here, and then that's what I can't remember that character's name. But he was from the Game Boy exclusive.
Ballet.
Yeah, that's it. And then the rest of the game was a mix of Mega Man, I think 4 and 5 characters. Oh yeah.
I did this one right over here. This is the only oil painting that was done for the magazine, as far as we know.
Okay.
It went through a couple of different revisions, so that was the first draft. He submitted the draft, but the armor plating and everything. This is from Castlevania 2. This is supposed to be Castlevania 4. So Nintendo went back to the artist and said, "Hey, did you even look at the game? This is, you're using the wrong character models." So they had to redo that into this. And then originally his body was shifted a different way. You can kind of see where some of it was erased a little bit. He painted it, and then there was something that he had to change. So they made him like shift half of his body a certain way. That's why like originally the painting had him going a different way, and then had to repaint it. That was like the draft that he did before finishing up the painting and stuff. So this one, it was very involved.
And these are all just like private citizen fans that submit to cover art?
No, they were all hired. Either they were in-house Nintendo artists, or they were hired by a marketing firm for Nintendo. So some of these artists are like famous artists that went on to do other things. One of the artists was actually like a fine art artist that just happened to be hired by the marketing agency. And one of the artists, I forget which pieces were his, but Rose McGowan. Yeah, her father is one of the artists in this room, Dan McGowan. The developers didn't have a way of getting those maps out. This is how all maps were made back in the 80s.
I remember like the Zelda map.
Someone did the exact same thing. Yeah, as far as we know, this is like the only surviving example of a player map that exists. I mean, I'm sure there are something somewhere, but yeah, this is because it's a process. Very, very long. Painted it, and then there was something that he had to change. So they made him like shift half of his body a certain way. That's why like originally the painting had him going a different way, and then had to repaint it. That was like the draft that he did before finishing up the painting and stuff. So this one, it was very involved.
And these are all just like private citizen fans that submit to cover art?
No, they were all hired. Either they were in-house Nintendo art magazine.
as far as we know.
Okay.
It went through a couple of different revisions. So that was the first draft.
Print it all.
Yeah. And if you take a look right over here on stuff like the Mega Man maps and stuff like that, where it kind of tells you can see the character. Same deal. And they would take pictures of them. You can kind of see where
they're perfectly. Yeah. Oh, I didn't know it was so archaic. I thought the developer just like did that easily.
Yeah. No, I mean it was a process, and people got paid to do this.
Is there any other backstory?
This one right over here, Nintendo went back to the artist and said, "Hey, did you even look at the game? This is, you're using the wrong character models." So they had to redo that into this. And then originally his body was shifted a different way. You can kind of see where some of it was. Some of these artists are like famous artists that went on to do other things. One of the artists was actually like a fine art artist that just happened to be hired by the marketing agency. One of the artists, I forget which pieces were his, but Rose McGowan. Yeah, her father is one of the artists in this room, Dan McGowan.
Yeah. So someone built that house then, and
someone built that house, and yeah. So you can actually see some of the physical models that we have inside the glass case or the acrylic case right over there.
Oh, were those? So we were wondering which came first, the model or the cover, but I guess those are the models.
Those are the models that they photographed for the covers.
Oh man, I thought we'd look at those again.
Oh no, that's the other way around.
Okay. Yeah.
Give me the one.
Yeah. So those are. Oh, that's really cool.
You want to go by? And speaking of slapping the thing right on top, this is one of the few examples where you can kind of see them like doing the pasting, all of that. They actually, the Nintendo Power stuff was actually a clear file that they would lay on top of your
Oh yeah, she was. You're right.
Yeah.
The amount of time you get voice actor, not just your voice.
Yeah.
I actually think those
Super Metroid.
Oh, that's what yeah, you can do that.
But still have
Old friend.
Yeah, my mom gave me the photo when I moved out.
That's incredible.
That's right, I didn't know that when I saw her here.
I'll have to make a donation, though, right?
I'm going for the other hand.
We started doing that because it was just like, I wanted to, because we are a 501c nonprofit, so like, if I just put out a bucket, no one would do anything, so giving someone a reason to donate. Yeah, in years. I have an aunt that was in here, but we were to rescue everything up.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Take a picture of all the Mario stuff.
Yeah. All the Mario stuff is cool.
We're just saying that to my mom, yeah. Yeah.
Do you mind if I take your picture with them?
Sure.
I can give you her name.
Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's super serendipitous. It's weird. It's like occasionally, because I have some of these that are like lists of the high scores and stuff. Like, so I have kind of just like, oh,
Right, I know, and then I saw that, I was like, wait a minute.
And I've never met one in person, but I have had people online tell me that they're the artists of the office.
I was just gonna ask you about that.
Dustin, which one's your number? Or is it either of those?
The top one, the bottom one is number one.
Okay.
I did see you guys. You probably met him at Oh, okay.
They just announced Jared's building issue. He was like one of my favorite masterpieces. He has like 10 seconds of screen time.
So I struck the lens and scored. I think
No, not until after. Not until after.
so. They would have done.
Okay. Yeah, so I still have that photo and it's written on the back. It's from like 1989. He must have been promoting like Mario World is 91.
That was probably, yeah, that was probably Mario 3.
Yeah.
That was Mario's there, but Mario.
Right.
Yeah.
I keep a DS in the museum for StreetPass.
Oh, nice.
We were just talking about StreetPass all the way up. You ready?
I know, because I miss bringing my DS to conventions and I'm getting all those. Yeah.
I would have probably switched my
Check it out.
No, but it's like she makes before we take off. It's kind of featured not very Yeah, me too.
A little wild.
Oh. It's an animation cell.
Oh my god, I remember this. Roadrunner.
Oh yeah.
I love this show.
Eyes are slightly transparent.
I know this. I know that.
I wish they would. I wish that would be the only thing he says about the movie.
He is a silent protagonist.
I hope they keep to be entirely honest. You play your card.
Oh, no, I didn't. Yeah. I do have 40 pieces of that. I always like to run it like that. Yeah, there's some magic quests that I never showed you. Well, yeah, I think you probably
saw them, but yeah, I wanted to like see them. I love this game. This game doesn't get
That's a
talked about
sleeper
enough.
hit. I always bring it to shows because, like,
It's-
I didn't think anyone knew what block.
I know I should say that. They should fix that. They should fix that.
This is on Blockbuster, right? They were just straight and labeled. We were just at
What's going on?
That's coming soon, Dad. The Peachy Stretches show.
Alright guys, let's keep moving. Come back.
Take a picture next time.
Oh yeah.
It's like 500 photographs. I'm pretty sure it's the only interesting example of how they made that. There was no like passive exporting or anything like that. It had to be somewhere if they were just using final film.
Oh, okay, no one else.
All she was doing was trying to maximize that.
I think we have it. It looks like
Shinobi?
no, from Mortal Kombat.
Oh, that's a classic. 64 game, I think. Edge 2.
If anyone has any questions, let me know.
Yeah, when we found him, there's a picture of him on the table, but when we found him, his head was completely collapsed. The thermoplastic in his head had just disintegrated.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is the original art to it. This stuff is nuts. Issue 48. I mean, this is the Valiant art.
This is in-house Nintendo.
Oh, this is in-house Nintendo.
Yeah, but what? A lot of this stuff was redrawn specifically for the magazine. Like on the other side, we have a bunch of Mega Man art. A lot of people think that is the art from the Japanese guide, and it is line for line identical, but it is a Nintendo Power artist repainting it. Because they moved with such speed on that magazine that they couldn't wait for a publisher to send them art.
So are this is the original. This is the fan art.
Yeah, so this was actually, we lucked out with this because 9 times out of 10 Nintendo never sent fan art back, right? Yeah. And so, but I lucked out that he had done the inks, photocopied them, painted the photocopies, and sent those in.
Smart guy.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, we lucked out with the envelope art there in the corner. That was just when they demoed the Redmond building in 2010, and then built a new one. There was a game professor at the time that just kind of ran in and took shit off the walls, and then not me, but like otherwise then.
Yeah, after Acclaim bought Valiant, all the IP stuff. I know that when they moved the offices from New York to Long Island, that the vault that all the original art and stuff was rated. And a friend of mine from New York, Joe Petrolak, is the one that got a lot of that stuff. Only because he had a weird relationship with Shooter.
Artists talk about how like TSR, like a lot of that stuff was fished out downstairs. The stuff that survived was fished out downstairs.
Yep.
It's crazy.
That's nuts. It's to think about it now. It is
all that easily stuff, just like in a dumpster. Like, are you? What?
No, it's nuts. It's covers. It was just nobody cared. They just threw it away.
Because video games were a fad. It wasn't supposed to be a big thing. We were supposed to be like done with this in like 20 years. And now it's just like.
Yeah, and I was always a Sega kid.
You look at this room and you assume like seeing it all possible.
But this is usually the artist alley for a different character. So it's cool to see it being used in this way. I've never seen it like this before.
I was telling my friend about they were asking what it is you do, and I was like, claymation art.
They had to go other do other con stuff. Like, so I saw the sign. I was like, I just Am I taking a selfie real quick? Yeah, sure. So I'm gonna go actually check the whole thing out and take some photos and stuff. I could actually get to see it in person. I saw you build the whole thing online over the years. It's just cool to actually see it. Thank you. That's wrap it all in. All right, I'm gonna go check it out.
Like this in the shoes.
I have to go buy a gift for my daughter, so I'm gonna step out.
Okay.
Like these Ninja Turtles.
Oh, that was down there.
So like, what's the like? Can someone like? So that's the original painting. Oh, really? So how do you get part of this?
You got it from the original artist. Yeah, you just happen to have it everything here is original. So it's the.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No worries. Yeah. Yeah. That's why some of them you'll see as sketches, others are actual. You can kind of see like the brush strokes. This one was airbrushed. There is actually a photograph, so the artist took a picture of these two guys standing there, and then airbrushed on top of it. That's what was included as Nagame. Do you guys have any questions on any of the other pieces too? Because some of them have little backstories and things like that. If you want to just learn more about something. Let's see. This one right over here. Prior to everything just being a computer file that you can export, this was 500
Yeah. Magical Quest starring Mickey Mouse. Yep. Repeat the game. I got halfway left. This is from Tournament Fighter?
Oh, nice.
One over there.
I have that box set, the VHS box set.
Oh, yeah. The voice actress
Look,
is here.
Mega Man.
Cool.
Yeah, but Lena.
For
Oh, I didn't know.
which one is this one?
Not $101.
Well, actually, like 110. Like, okay.
You gotta remind Melody thing. That's pretty cool.
And then Romy.
Oh yeah, Chromie is in there. Oh, that's actually cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. I can't really find my HOA feed as well.
I already told you about my student. I'm like, hey, by the way.
The original photos that used to comprise
It's good. That's pretty cool.
Especially as well as Merry Christmas stuff.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I think it's a Christmas thing. Oh yeah, there you go.
That's one of my favorite things for sure.
Yeah.
I was obsessed with this drawing.
It's hard to get. But you can get it here, you can see it.
Yeah.
I should bring it.
That's probably the only. Yeah.
Yeah.
What? No, I'm pretty sure.
I went there, no, and then he was, yeah. And I asked, is this a line call while you turn on?
I did that song with you. What were those?
These are actually not used. So this was this artist desperately wanted to work with that, and so he wanted to set up. So you're part of it.
I know, right?
That's pretty cool.
Did it work? Nice.
Cool seeing the Zelda 2 stuff.
All that painted Mega Man stuff on the other side.
Oh, yeah.
Like that. It's cool because like Zelda 2 style.
Yeah.
I used to get like a game.
I had a game with them too. Oh, do you remember the game?
I used to do that.
No, I haven't.
What do you need? I'm so and sit down right next to it and just be like, I'm only taking questions on Mario. And this was just Mario only. I've been trying so hard to not like bring it up online.
I had to say something because so many people were like, "You're perfect, right?" I'm just like, fine. But the thing on my feed is like all of my photos of us together, and like, people for 3 years, and like people are like going on those photos and like saying shitty things, and I'm like, stop living my feed.
Yeah.
These photos are years old. Like, what are you doing?
Even if you did something horrible, these photos are so long ago.
So here's me as a baby.
That's just what
I just had agreeing on that picture. Yeah.
Yeah, so
I just saw that and I was like, wait, was that it?
yeah, so he was found in an abandoned storage locker, and he looked like this when we found him.
Okay.
So this is him in 1990.
Okay, this was 1989.
Yeah, so that would be right after he was built. And then,
That's my mom, yeah.
and then like all the thermoplastic in his head, it just disintegrated. So we had to build him a little bit differently. So we couldn't replace the thermoplastic. So like he's all foam now. He's basically soft, so he's a little bit soft.
Okay. Because I saw that and I just had to bring up that picture. Like, wait a minute. My dad was in the starting business, so he was like gaming conventions and like making all my dad.
Could have been like this was the Nintendo World Championship.
Okay.
You can't tell by the,
You gave my take a picture.
Billy and you gotta figure this out. Billy and her mother have been there before, but never met dad. So now
yeah. You have Mario?
no,
We were there last time. Cast that Marcus was there. Oh, dude, yeah, he was one of the cosplayers. I rented Mario. Yeah. I already know.
I don't get into this. So, more and more, a little bit more. They don't sort of
I made this account before this, so everyone at my StreetPass, somebody who's been in my
Yeah, the bigger selection.
Usually when you bring
I always see that on DMC music.
I haven't got like any decent videos.
I know, it's super cool. It must have fallen at some point. It flew too close to the sun. Is this yours?
It is.
Oh, it's super cool.
Thank you.
Where are you from?
We're based in Simi Valley.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no.
Yeah, 6 hours. What's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what he looked like when we found him.
Where did you find him?
So he was in an abandoned storage unit. So like really, and it was an auction, like storage unit auction. And the person who bought him started an amateur restoration and ran out of money. And so they did some stuff that we could have done. That's why he looks a little different. Originally he would have had like a plastic skull. That's what it dissolved, and that was the problem. Just make sure it's so they basically around. So he's stuffed instead of sculpted, he's stuffed. So that's why they like really use for that to put him back the way that he was supposed to be.
Yeah. It looks great to me. Yeah.
Like, you know, he's supposed to say everything.
I've never been over here. Thank you. I think
I'll get started. I'm Stephan. The last 20 years I've spent in the game industry. I started with THQ back in the day when that was still possible. Yeah. My first game was Fairly Odd Parents for the original Xbox. Spent a lot of time in kids licensing. I did 9 years at Disney, a couple years at Nickelodeon. But most recently I was at Bungie, and I was part of the layoff that everyone probably heard about, the 100-person layoff recently. So yeah, lifelong lover of games and the game industry, and then and also a collector. So I thought I'd just kind of go start with kind of the history of like how I started this museum. If anyone hasn't been to the museum, has everyone been to the museum? Okay. That way I don't need visual aids, because you can just go look at my giant visual aid. So just kind of, I usually get a lot of questions about how that all started and how it turned into that. So I thought it's the museum. Huh? What's the museum? The Art of Nintendo Power Museum. Yeah, the one right there. Yeah. So yeah, I just thought I'd start with just kind of a brief history of kind of how all that happened, and then open it up to questions, and we'll take it from there. So it actually all started with the Ninja Turtles. I was a big Turtles collector when I was a kid, and kept collecting. Was real into the Ninja Turtles. Had Ninja Turtle tattoos. Kevin Eastman was the best man at my wedding. Wow. So real into Ninja Turtles. But you know, I think with a lot of collectors, I was like always after the chase, right? And so I got to the point, and this was right before IDW started making more comics, basically right before the Nickelodeon buyout, so like it was possible to have everything like reasonably, right? And so like I got to the point where I had every single Playmates action figure, playset, vehicle, every single variant of every single comic book, you know, every printing, everything, right? And so like I've been growing that collection for many, many years, and it's interesting, at least for me, hitting the definition of done almost immediately changes you, where like I was building this living, breathing, growing thing. I was like nurturing a thing, right? And then as soon as I was done, I was kind of like looking around my collection room, and it was just like, it's just a weight around my neck. And it's just like, you know, what, does this define me as a person? Like I started asking like weird existential questions, because at that point I had gotten sort of like a name as like the Ninja Turtle guy in documentaries and running websites and the whole nine yards. And, but it was just, it just became this thing that was sort of weighing me down. And so, at the same time that happened, my first wife, who's no longer with us, got cancer. And so, I was looking for something to sort of distract me from that too. Like obviously I wanted to like give her the attention she needed, but like also, that's a lot to be, you know, hanging over your head. And so I was sort of looking for something new to do. And I had this little shoebox collection of Super Nintendo games when I was a kid. And I always had that like vision of like, oh, what would it be like if I had every Nintendo game, right? And so I was in this position where I had this giant collection that I didn't really want anymore, that I could use as a piggy bank to sort of explore other things. So I started just like mass liquidating this Ninja Turtle collection. And then I started buying games. And like I was like, oh, you know, like I live in Southern California, and so we, you know, you can't throw a rock without hitting a retro store, especially around like 2013, 2014. And so I could be in a different store every day of the week looking for games. And so I was just taking up all of my time looking for games and building these sets. And of course, as my wife continued to deteriorate, I spent more time, you know, focusing, obsessing over this goal. And then, you know, by the time she had passed away, I had put together 12 North American sets of various games. And so at that point, there was another sort of like point, you know, inflection point of like, okay, what am I actually doing? And I realized, you know, how much I love the hunt versus like having the thing. And I was like, well, and this is not disparaging. Obviously, we're in a building full of video game collectors. I'm not at all disparaging. Everybody can collect the way they want to collect. But for me, collecting games, I had this realization that like, oh, this isn't hard, it's just expensive. And like, if I have the budget, I can buy the thing. Like it's out there to buy. Almost always it's out there to buy, you know? Unless you're, you know, some crazy sealed graded whatever. But like generally if you just want the thing, you can have it if you have the budget. And so I was like, okay, well like, what is the harder thing? I want to do the harder thing. And so I started collecting like point of sale displays and like fiber optic signs and all that like 90s, you know, World of Nintendo branded sort of like cabinets and all that kind of stuff. And I got to the point where I kind of got what I wanted from that. And so I was like, okay, so now what's the harder thing? And so I was like, okay, well what about like internal employee memorabilia? So I started talking to Nintendo gameplay counselors. And in fact, that's actually the first exhibit that we built for the museum. We have, if you were at Portland in 2019, we did this Nintendo gameplay counselor museum, which we're actually talking about doing at this show next year. But I was able to basically, I had enough gameplay counselor stuff from just like reaching out to 300 gameplay counselors. You know, jackets and like the MacBooks that they would use to like, you know, answer questions and stuff, like really, really awesome historical information. I was able to recreate a gameplay counselor's desk as it was in 1990, I think I dated it at like 1992. And everything but the physical desk was actually from a Nintendo gameplay counselor. So like the television and the consoles and the map books and the everything was actually from a counselor desk. And so that was sort of the genesis of like, oh, like maybe I want to like tour stuff. That's kind of cool. But then that kind of slowed down, and I was like, okay, other than like a trickle of like things, then I was sort of starting to stagnate again. And at that time, I met a gameplay counselor named Jeff Hatcher. He's a great guy, really interesting dude. But he had said, hey, I don't have anything from my counselor days, but when I left gameplay counseling, I started drawing for Nintendo Power, and I have some of that. Would you be interested? And like, in a very like animated way, like the camera zoomed into my brain and it shook and it exploded, and like, it had never occurred to me. So similarly to, I think, when we were kids, how we never really, it never occurred to us that there were voice actors behind the characters that we love. Now, obviously, as adults, we acknowledge that and celebrate them, but like, sort of similarly, where it just had never occurred to me that someone had to draw all that art, and that some of it might still be around. And so that was like, oh my God, this is something that I can explore, where everything I find, there's only one. Like, this is the promised land. This is what I want to do. This is the hardest thing, right? And so so that's, I started exploring that, and I started with just basically whoever was actually credited in the magazine. The magazine's very poorly credited, by the way. Like, for instance, the 99% of the cover artists in the magazine were just credited as Griffiths Advertising, the advertising agency that they used. So like, no one had any idea who any of these artists were. Or they would incorrectly credit them for issues. Like, it was chaos when they were putting these magazines together, so some of these artists would be credited in magazines that they didn't work on. Meanwhile, they weren't credited in the magazines that they did work on. So it was, the process was very much just, it's not, I never go like, oh, I'm going to go out and find this piece of art. It's always just like, I'm going to go find people, and then figure out what they either still have or what they remember, and sometimes they have stuff and sometimes they don't, and sort of sometimes they say they don't remember names, and then I say, oh, well, let's just talk for 5 hours. And then by the end of that conversation, I have a list of names because we were able to just generate that, right? So, so as I started to amass more and more of this collection, it was like, okay, well, like, what do I do with all of this? At the time, it was just hanging in my house, right? And I just didn't know what to do with it. And so I was like, well, I really enjoy, I was thinking back to that Portland show that I did with the gameplay counselor stuff, and I was like, I could start a museum. And so I formed a 501c3 nonprofit art museum. We don't have a physical location, that's only a travel show, but I love the way that works, because first of all, if I like donated all of this to an actual museum, like and now don't get me wrong, like the Strong Museum of Play, or like, there are some really amazing video game focused museums, but were I to donate the collection to a museum, it wouldn't be shown the way that you see it in there as like a cohesive collection, unless they built me a wing, which they're not going to build me a $20 million wing to house my art collection. And so what would happen was they would be like, oh, well, we'll put it all in the archive and it'll be safe, and then maybe we'll do like a Disney thing, and so they'll pull out the Disney pieces and you'd see the Disney pieces for a while and then they go back in. But like, you wouldn't, the way that I do that and am able to travel the show and show it as a complete cohesive collection, it tells a story. Because like, as much as I do love the aspect of like, oh, like, here's some cool art that's like, isn't it neat that this still exists, and like, it's nostalgic for you guys, and trust me, that is a huge reason why we do this. But also, like, I like telling the story of like how the magazine was made. Because even modern print magazines, the few that exist still, aren't made the way that those magazines are made. Like, I don't know if anyone saw the Dragon Warrior map. in that room. That's like 500 photographs that they just basically did. It's like thermal paper, like they did like the Game Boy camera, except for its color. And so they just had this. They called it the device, where they would just yes.
Yeah. For example, what about Kingdom Hearts? That was also that was also from Disney, but it's made as a game. Is there any possible way that they would have improvised that one in 2002?
Well, they didn't. By then, they would have done physical art. Most of the art would already been digital. Funnily enough, I was at Disney Interactive when they did Kingdom Hearts 1, so I actually worked on Kingdom Hearts. But by then, it would have just been key art. Basically, Disney would have supplied the art. Whereas the stuff, that's actually kind of a fun segue. So, like, the magazine was done very quickly. There was a 1 month lag, right? So they were only basically 30 days behind, right? And so they had to generate so much art and generate it so quickly that they didn't have time to be like, hey Capcom, send us your art, because they couldn't email it. They needed high res. They couldn't just scan a manual, because then if you scanned a manual and then tried to copy that into another publication, it would look like garbage. So they needed high-res source images, and so like the Mega Man stuff, for instance, in there is not Capcom art. It looks identical to the Japanese manual art, but it's an American Nintendo Power artist repainting Japanese art, because if you paint it on a cell, you get that very crisp line, and it's the colors are very saturated, and so it looks great in print. So a lot of that work is, it's funny because it's authentic in that it's the art that is in the magazine, but it's also counterfeit because it's been copied. But yeah, so by around the N64 era, they started, which is why most of the stuff in there would be from like 1988 to 1995. Everything started to either go digital, or they would just get key art assets from the publisher, because at that point they could just email them, right? But with few exceptions, like for instance, I didn't bring it this year, but we have the poster for Superman 64, which is not a great game, and I understand that. But that particular piece of art does just happen to be physical, because what it was a piece of key art from the style guide of the Bruce Timm Superman show. So so like that piece of art it's on DC paper stock, and it's kind of a cool piece of comic art. But we have it because it all happens to be the poster for Superman 64 and Nintendo Power. But yeah, so really, we love doing this. I feel like this is our final form, right? I'm gonna retire into doing this someday. I want to do it full time. Right now, the reason why we only do sort of West Coast shows, we're based in Simi Valley, and I do need to balance it against my actual career in the game industry. So I can't just take like 12 days to do an East Coast show, because I have to drive the work, and it's always going to be me. I love that, like, the volunteers here help us like set up easels and stuff like that, but like as far as handling the art, it's always got to be me, because I'm never going to put someone in a position where something happens to the art and it's not my fault. Like, if it's my fault, fine. Like, because I've already assumed the risk of something happening, because the mission now is to share the work. And over the next, knock on wood, over the next 40 years of me doing this, something's gonna happen, right, to that art, or to a piece, or like, the maquettes, the clay models in the case. They're incredibly delicate. I'm sure I'll have to fix one at some point. Something will happen, but it needs to be my fault, because if something happens to a piece of artwork in the service of sharing it with all of you, so be it. That's the risk that I have assumed. So yeah, this is sort of this is kind of my final form. I love it. I love sharing the work with all of you. That's why I do it. There's no money in this for me, by the way.
It's only cost me money. So the shows, I just charge the shows whatever it costs me to do them. So you know, if it's like there's a show that I do in Simi Valley where I live, that show gets charged $200 because that's what it costs me to do the show that's in my backyard. You know, but that's also why I take, you know, we are a 501c3 nonprofit. The donations that we take in, I don't spend it on art. The art's always self-funded because I don't know, I feel weird taking money from you guys and then spending it on art. It's just a thing that I feel weird about. But, so like, that does, however, subsidize the shows, or like, you know, feeding me and my volunteer. But like, or, you know, when we do shows that are further east, obviously, because it gets exponentially more expensive. Like when we have a show in South Carolina that's interested, but it's like an $8,000 show for them out of pocket because it's just like that's just how much it costs to rent the truck and drive it and the gas and that kind of thing. You know, barring our time, we don't charge for our time. So donations go to subsidize some of that too, because it's like. Shows that can afford it, fine. Like Portland has infinite money. Portland Retro Gaming Expo, they're very well funded, so they can pay their way. But like, I'd love to do mom and pop shows that are like further out, but I can't charge those people $8,000. That's like what they make on their shows. So that's the kinds of things that we spend donations on, or like framing. You know, that room represents about $40,000 in framing alone. So, because that's all museum grade acrylic, right? Because at the same time that I say I take on a lot of risk, I do what I can, right? I mitigate whatever risk I can. So like, that's all museum grade acrylic, you know, acid-free everything. Those frames are beautiful. But so yeah, that's the kind of stuff that we spend our money on. So that's like the prepared talk that I have. So I'm happy to take questions if anyone has any questions. Yeah.
How many of the posters that would actually come from the that you actually do have? How many of the posters do you have? Do you have any posters that you gave in some of the magazines and some of your art for?
We have some here. So if you walk in the door, I think Castlevania's on the end, or the white Castlevania frame. The posters are I try to group art together so that it makes that's why all the covers are together. So I think I have 4 or 5 posters here, and then I have another handful that I did right here. I have to kind of curate. We work out of a 9-foot van basically because I can't use a box truck. Because the thing about box trucks is that you don't know they're leaking until they're leaking. And actually had an issue we did, one year we did Gameboy Expo in Phoenix, Arizona, and it was a very humid day. It did not even occur to me that humidity would be that big of an issue. I was unloading the truck, and if you look at our frames, they have a paper backing. All of the paper backs were wet. And everything's fine. Nothing happened to any of the art, but it could have been horrible.
He's the strongest fabric.
How'd you get the giant Mario?
Sorry? Our Mario mascot costume. So that is the 1989 official Nintendo Mario mascot costume. So whenever they would like bring Mario to like we have a couple pictures on the table. The larger picture is him in 1990 at the Nintendo World Championships. So he was found that the other photo of him where his head is crushed in, that's how we found him in an unpaid storage unit. So he was in an unpaid storage unit. He got auctioned off like Storage Wars, right? And then that person started a restoration, and then couldn't finish it. They basically ran out of money, and so then they came to us to see if we would take over the project, and we did. There was some stuff that they did that we probably wouldn't have done ourselves that we couldn't reverse, so that he looks a little different. Originally, he would have had basically like cosplay armor, that kind of plastic, thermoplastic. He would have had a thermoplastic skull underneath him, and then the fabric would just be matched to the plastic. So his features his lines were very rigid, and so The way that he was restored, though, is they just decided to put like basically a foam bucket underneath him and then stuff around the foam bucket. So that's what all his features are much softer now because he's mostly stuffed. But we love him. He's doing his best. I think people like that he's a little creepy. I think they'd like him less if he was less creepy. There's another instance of, because they made a handful of those costumes. There's another one I know of that is in absolutely perfect condition, and I would love to have it for archival purposes, just so that it's safe. I'd still bring that one because he's ridiculous and everyone loves him.
Have you lost or accidentally destroyed any art in your storage or bits?
Things have gotten broke. We actually broke a frame this weekend. But those frames are made to be workhorses. Like and that's why I use wood so that they give. And again, we use plexiglass instead of glass because that would be a disaster. There's actually, when I first started doing, because I started collecting before I decided to be a museum, and so like in those days, if just to save cost, because they were just going to hang in my house, if it was under a certain like size, I would frame it in glass, and because I wasn't worried, because it just basically weight was the thing I was concerned about, because I have an 8-year-old daughter, and I was concerned she'd pull one down on her head, and that would be good. So, but I have found slowly, because like sometimes I'll pull, because I do curate these shows, and so I'll pull out a piece from the archive that I haven't shown in years, and then like I'll put it on the truck and I'll bring it off and I'll pull it off. I'm like, oh, this broke. This one was glass. I think I've weeded out almost all of the glass pieces and replaced them. But so that's the kind of damage we had. I did have a framer lose a piece once, and so that was a lesson to be learned. We don't need to go into what piece it was, but and there was a court settlement. But yeah, so there was one instance in which a framer did lose a piece. But so basically now we bring, and I would recommend this to anyone framing with anyone, is you take the art, you bring it, you have to measure it, you take the art back with you, and then when they are ready, when they have the frame ready to put it in the frame, you bring the art back and you stand there. But yeah, so it hasn't happened since. I've had to repair, like sometimes Dr. Mario's little disc on his forehead fell off once. It's a reflector. That's a product of a bygone era when lighting was not great in the hospitals. It allowed the surgeon to bounce light off of, like, you have the primary light and then the reflector on their head would like reflect the light down into whatever they were looking at. Yes. Sorry.
Do you have like a frame or you go to frame or
So the people that we use, it's technically Michael's.
Okay, I work at Michael's.
It's technically Michael's. Now, it's whether or not like people are like, oh, should I take them to my like? Obviously, it's a different staff at every Michael's. So like my Michael's, those framers had a private framing business for like 30 years and then retired into Michael's, right? And so they're incredible framers, and so like it's just case by case, right? But yeah, the reason I like Michael's is because they laser cut frames, or they laser cut mats, and with work like we have, like I have some of those, that envelope art in the corner, that's like a 15 or 19 opening mat, and I double mat everything. So like if someone were to hand cut that mat, it would be, it's obviously already very expensive, it would be absorbently expensive if someone cut that mat by hand. So so using a company that has a laser cutter is helpful.
Do you have like a favorite piece, either shown there or in your collection? Like
I have a couple favorites for different reasons. I love that the Castlevania painting. First of all, that's the only oil painting ever painted for the magazine. I did, yeah.
Do you remember this opinion when you're done with this question? Tell me what you thought about it.
We can talk about it after the panel.
Okay.
Yeah, so that Castlevania 4 oil painting, the artist's name is Phillip Howe. One thing that I think is really charming about that piece is that I personally, that's one of my favorite pieces that I've ever seen. Like, just favorite pieces of art, right? And he hates it. He hates that painting. He is actually, Phil, I love him to death. We have a very good personal relationship. He is the most self-deprecating artist I've ever met in my life. And so when he thought he had already gotten rid of that painting years ago, and then he found it and brought it to me, and he's like, please get this out of my sight. And I'm like, I don't know how I feel that like my favorite painting I've ever seen in my life, you hate it. Like, so yeah, I love that the Castlevania oil painting. I also love that then later he found those preliminary sketches that he did, so that I could show process. I love showing process, you know. And I brought a couple other things. There's the Ninja Gaiden poster that shows the preliminary and the Star Fox preliminary. Those are really, really cool. I love the kids' art. The kids' art's really hard to find. Nintendo never returned the envelopes, whereas like most of the time with the professional art, they were contractually obligated to return art. So oftentimes it's just an exercise in finding the person, right, as I was saying earlier. But the kids' art they didn't return. So those envelopes, we have about 100 of them total, but again, those frames are very expensive. And so it takes a while to frame. The Redmond building, the original Nintendo building for Nintendo America in, I think it was 2010, they bulldozed it and they built a new one. And so a former gameplay counselor basically took the call center is where they would put up envelopes. They're just like, oh yeah, this was cool. And like, it's because they were getting thousands of envelopes every day. And so, in fact, if you watch there's that Donkey Kong Country VHS tape that they sent out years ago. It's on YouTube, you can find it. But like they pan right through that room, and you can see like envelopes on the wall. And so he tells it very heroically. Like, the wrecking balls were coming into the building, and I ran in and I stole a bunch of envelope arts, and then I found you years later. It's very funny. But that's how that art was saved. Employees just happened to save some on the wall, so which is heartwarming and heartbreaking at the same time, because it's like, yay, we saved 100 pieces, but that's like literally hundreds of thousands of envelopes that weren't saved. I try not to think of things that way. It looks like, because you see it all in one room, it looks like I have a lot of success, but like I do this constantly all the time, and so like for every one piece that I find, there's dozens of stories where it's like, oh, this was recycled, I threw it away, I never got it returned. That's like, Nintendo was supposed to return everything. Sometimes it just didn't happen. Sometimes it just got lost. And so, like, if the artist didn't have like a very good rep who would hound them, they wouldn't get their art back sometimes. So that I love. And then like the Wily ship, I love, because that's just like, I love pieces where you look at, I mean, look, none of that stuff should exist, really, 35 years later, but like that piece in particular really shouldn't exist, because it was a contract artist. Nintendo wasn't Nintendo then. They didn't have like the brand recognition, right? So like, there was no reason for a contract artist. When the deliverable was just a photograph, they just took a photograph and sent it to Nintendo, and that's why like some of those sculptures, they just stopped sculpting them. Like the Mario Paint Mario is a popsicle stick on the other side, on the back side. If you look around the side, it's just a popsicle stick, because they knew exactly the photo they were going to take, and nobody cared whether or not they sculpted what you couldn't see, and so they just took that one photo and sent that photo to Nintendo, and normally they just threw that stuff away. Like I have photos of the Maniac Mansion in there, and that was, he photographed that mansion and immediately threw it away. It was just gone. Yeah.
Was somebody basically disturbed or screwed up in the head when they made that video game? Because there's a disturbing scene in the game where you put a hamster in the microwave.
That is a very disturbing scene. Yes, I can't speak for the developers of the game. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned that you wouldn't sell or donate your collections like a museum for reasons you explained. That's great. But have you ever done or considered like a 3-month exhibition, like a lending it to a museum that might be interested in showing what you have to offer out?
I would love to, and yeah, it's just finding a space that's close enough to do it.
Right.
Because here's the thing, again, I have to drive to work.
Right.
There's a caveat to that. If there were a museum, there are museum shippers, right? Like when museums borrow work from each other, there are shipping companies that will ship that work, and they're like museum shipping companies. But like you're talking about tens and tens of thousands of dollars, which is why I never considered it for a show. Because like I've had shows say like, oh well, we'll just ship out the work and then fly out and then do the show and then and we'll pay for shipping. And I'm like, no, you won't. That would be $25,000 for you to ship that show. So yeah, I'm totally open to it. It's just finding a museum that, of course, finding a museum that's willing to sort of kind of foot the bill. And a lot of gallery spaces are for-profit galleries, right? I am 8-bit or like any of those there are gallery spaces in Los Angeles that I've talked to, but they aren't interested in doing a show if I'm not selling the work, because they want to be able to me to sell the work and then get a cut, right? That's the
I thought of cartoon art museum in San Francisco, just as an example. I don't know if they would do it,
yeah, I think the closest that I've gotten so far is the Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con has opened, a couple of years ago they opened a museum that's off-site, it's a permanent museum. And their first display they did was Pac-Man, so they understand that the Venn diagram between comic people and video game people is almost a circle. So they get it. So we've been talking about that. It's just it takes a while, and those museums like that are booked up for years and years and years. So yeah, I'm totally open to it. Yeah.
Have you thought about making this probably kind of cheap and and the fact that have you thought about copying any of the art that you have, just in case it's ruined?
So it's all scanned, and even my maquettes are 3D scanned and everything. I don't typically make that public for a couple reasons. For one thing, I had one of the vendors here actually was talking about that Game Boy that I have in that case. It's a contest-winning Game Boy. He was like, "Oh, we can scan that and make a bunch. We can sell them." And I'm like, that's not really something I'm interested in doing. Mostly because in instances like that, I don't want to be responsible for there to be a market of fakes. And so to have someone get defrauded and then have it be my fault. Part of our gameplay counselor museum is the map books that the counselors use to answer calls. And I understand that people would love to have copies of that, but the originals are photocopies. So there would be no way, except for to watermark them to hell, which I have done. I've released some of them, very heavily watermarked. I couldn't make copies of those maps without them making them very reproducible. And so it would break my heart if someone paid thousands of dollars for a fake map book that I had a hand in making. But from a safety perspective, then everything is archived. I'm on the board of the Video Game History Foundation, and so I also work with them to make sure everything is safe. People ask about art books a lot. The copyright issues for those images are very complex, and there are entities out there that wouldn't have to be wrong to ruin my life. They would just have to decide they wanted to ruin my life. And you take an image I have a lot of Disney art out there, right? And so those are Disney characters that's part of an image that was generated by Nintendo, two of the most litigious companies on the planet. And so just unwinding who would be able to say yes to me doing an art book would be difficult. And generally with organizations that big, if like they don't want. They would rather say no because it's easier, because they don't have to figure it out. And like, you know, an art book for Nintendo would be like not even a blip on their radar as far as like, you know, it wouldn't move the needle for profit margins. So, you know, the likelihood of them, so that's really the only way that I would do an art book is if it was with Nintendo, and I just don't think that they would ever do that. They've been kind in the past, like, and they also understand that they can't stop me from. There's a thing called first sale doctrine. I legally own all of those art. You know, they were available for sale. They're not stolen. I bought those, and so they can't. No one can stop me from showing you artwork that I own. So that's the advantage of these kind of shows. Yeah.
So, thinking about the potential trip to South Carolina that you didn't do, I'm just wondering, if you had to have all the artwork be in a truck, would you need to drive that truck to South Carolina for all 8,000 miles?
Yeah. That's why that's why those shows are so difficult for me to do, because you know, if I do an East Coast show or even an East Coast-ish show from here, that's like a 3. If I killed myself driving, that would be like 3 days, right? And so it would be like 3 days, and then probably a 3-day show, and then 3 days back. And that's if I hurt myself badly doing that drive. And you know, as I am, you know, I just turned 42, and as I age, I am less willing to put my body through ridiculous things. So really, you would kind of probably extrapolate that to like between 10 and 12 days for me to do a show like that. So that's what, you know, and once I get to the point where this is self-sustaining and like it's hopefully my day job, or like I'm able to retire and then I kind of retire into this, I will absolutely do shows that are further out. Or, you know, also my daughter is 8 and she's not really, so it's this point where like she's not old enough to help. And so, like, she has to stay home because I do need someone to. Most of those trucks see 2 people. So if I'm not bringing my daughter, you know, my daughter needs to be able to help if she's going to be able to come. And so when she's older, maybe I'd be able to drive. But like, you know, even here, it's, you know, we have a sweetheart caretaker that is willing to watch her for $125 a day, but that's still like more overhead for these shows. So then, you know, it'd be like $1,000 at least in daycare for me to do an East Coast show, which would come out of pocket. I feel really weird about charging a show for daycare. I guess I could, but yeah. So those are the challenges. It's just a logistical challenge right now, balancing it against, you know, my relationship with my daughter and my career. Yeah, so yeah.
Okay, 2 quick questions. Or not. Do you have any of your digital stuff left? And how did you come upon the Mickey's Magical Quest art?
I have a handful of sentimental things from my digital collection, like the house in Dover that Kevin and Peter lived in when they created the Ninja Turtles. When I heard it got demolished and they made it into a parking lot, but when I heard it was going to be demolished, I drove out to Dover, New Hampshire, and I tore a piece of the house off. And I spirited it away in the middle of the night. So I still have things like that are, you know, that's so I have a piece of the house that the Ninja Turtles were created in. It was just I ripped a piece of siding off because it was just like a literal like jump out of the car, grab it, and jump back in before somebody called the cops. Look, they were demolishing the house anyway. So I do not feel bad. What's that? No, just a piece of wood. Yeah, it's just so I have some sentimental stuff. Obviously, like I have my tattoos. I can't really get rid of those. Sorry. Then what was your second question?
How did you come up on the Mickey's Magical Quest?
So the artist's name is Dan McGowan. Incidentally, he is Rose McGowan's dad. And actually, that's how. Unfortunately, and you know, it's been 35 years, and as things go on, I will find more artists via their obituaries. And so that was one of those cases where I found the artist's obituary, and it said, you know, leaves behind. He had a number of children, but one of them was named Rose, and I go, there's no way that this is Rose McGowan. And so I reached out to her on Instagram, and lo and behold, she actually responded to me. And she goes, you know, I'm like, is this your dad's work? And she's like, yes, that's my dad. And then she gave me her stepmother's phone number, which is like bananas. Like I feel like there's no way, like it was just like happenstance that any of that ever happened. And so I spoke to her stepmother, and she had, you know, all of his work was just sitting in the attic. And that piece was one of them. And so we were able to, the family still does have a few pieces. They have the Link's Awakening issue 50 with the owl and the sword. They have that cover, and they have the Empire Strikes Back Yoda cover. Both of those covers I would love to have. But you know what? It's an ethical thing. Like I decided early on I was going to be very ethical about this, and so like if they're like, hey, this is my dad, this is my dad's work that he's no longer with us, I'm not going to be like, give me the work. You know, like it's just like I can't have everything, and you know, they obviously know how to get a hold of me if the time comes and they change their mind. But like one of his kids has that owl and the sword like tattooed on his arm, so I was like, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna pressure him. So yeah, I'm very much a like when I talk to an artist or an artist family, it's not about going into the conversation. It's not about walking away with the thing. It's walking away with them knowing that when the time comes, if the time comes, that we are the best home for it, and that it will be safe, and that it will be maintained, and like so, just like imparting that seed of like we are the best home when you're ready, and then walking away. And if that time is never, then fine. At least a piece like that, we know it's safe. It's with the family, right? They're gonna care for it, right? It's walking away, making sure that there's a plan. And if that plan is me, great. And if that plan isn't me, fine. But let's have a plan, and let's not have it be your children, because I will tell you all in this room right now, your children do not want your things. And so just making sure that there's a plan for the things that should outlive you, regardless of what that plan is. Like my dad just recently passed away at 92. He had a lifetime's worth of stuff. I saved a knife, right? Like there was a knife that I had a very visual memory of sitting in his lap when I was a kid, and he would open the mail with that knife, and that's. Whatever reason, that's a core memory for me, and that's the one thing that I kept from my dad. Everything else was I didn't need it. But so yeah, your kids don't want your stuff. If you want your stuff to stick around, make sure there's a plan. Yeah.
Can you comment on at what point it made sense to organize as a 501 as a museum?
Sorry, again.
At what point did it make sense to organize like as a museum and not just a guy doing something cool?
Really, it was like the want to incorporate donations was that because like there's so much money is involved in doing these shows and like upkeeping the collection and that kind of thing. That was really the primary decision for the 501c3. Also, it's legally difficult for me to sell a piece now, and that's actually helpful to me because I have gotten some like toe curling offers on some work, and if it weren't legally difficult for me to sell it, there might be a pause where I'm like, oh, or like, oh, that would benefit the museum if I had that much, but now that I'm a nonprofit, and unless the assets go to another nonprofit, it's really difficult to sell something. What's that?
What makes it difficult?
Yeah, it has to be, gotta forget the term, but like, yes, there's a dramatic amount of paperwork. Yeah. But also, like, it's, like, I would only say don't lie, like, but it's genuinely helpful in conversations when I'm talking to, especially if it's like the estate of an artist or something like that, it's genuinely helpful for me to be able to honestly represent myself as a museum, because you know a lot of these people just like they care very much about their legacy and that kind of thing, and so like being able to provide that, not being a guy who's just going to hang it in his living room or stick it in a closet. Like there are instances where being able to say like, look what I'm doing, and like being able to show photos and videos and like you know, people like you enjoying the work, like being able to show that helps the conversation so much. There's art in there that like money wouldn't have gotten it done, right? And so being able to represent myself as a museum and show them that the work will be cared for and safe and shared with the people who love it, like that's really important for the conversation. Now, I didn't realize that until I was already doing it, so that I wouldn't call that a motivation for why I started the nonprofit, but that's been a very significant driver. Anything else?
How did you make your shirts?
I mean, I stole the logo. I don't sell these shirts. This is just to signify that we are employees of the museum. I use, and that's why like Art of Nintendo Power is not the name of my nonprofit. It's the Interactive Art Collection is the nonprofit. The Art of Nintendo Power is an educational museum exhibit. So like it's all about fair use. And so yeah, I couldn't incorporate around the word Nintendo. That would not have gone well for me. But and again, you know, also reasons like the going back to like the art book and like the first sale doctrine and no one being able to stop me from showing you the work, right? So yeah, this is just vector art, and I print them out, but we want to do like interactive art collection merch because we do have our own logo and our own branding and that kind of stuff, and that we can freely do. I'm also looking into being able to do on some of the art. I have artists who have given me permission to reprint the work because legally they can do that. The artists can do that. So there's a couple pieces like the Secret of Mana Dragon, where that was supposed to be Flammy from Secret of Mana, but it's not. It's just a dragon. And so like I don't know stuff like that where it's like this is not an IP related character. Like there's some stuff where like the Super C poster where it's just two dudes with guns. I'm pretty sure like the art doesn't have any branding on it. I could probably get. So there's some work that I'm thinking about like doing prints or something like that because you know monetizing the show where we can would be helpful. Also like honestly people like y'all want stuff like that. Like I get asked about pins and hats and all that kind of stuff. So I want to do something. It's just you know again. Nintendo wouldn't have to be right to cause me problems. They would have to just decide to cause me problems. So I'm trying to do everything within, you know, above board, you know, so that's, so yeah, there will be shirts available at some point. It just won't be this logo.
We are just about out of time.
We're about that time, all right.
You guys have any questions? He actually does have his museum up front. So if you guys are welcome to walk through it and everything, and he'll be there probably in about a minute or two.
I will, yeah, for the rest of the day. So, thank you guys for coming. Honestly, I like these like small scale, like I get to talk to you, like I'm not at the table. Like this was really, I like this better. Yeah. This whole thing is like the panel at Portland, like we filled the room, and I'm just like, yeah, but like, I mean, it was cool that there was like, I found, you know, like 500 people there, but like, it wasn't this. Like, this is